word, I want to pay honor and respect to those suffering around the world today. To those especially impacted by the recent tragedy in Nigeria. To those in Paris. To those victims of police brutality. Those I mentioned. Good morning again. My name is Businss. I'm the chairwoman of AFTV5. I'm also the owner of Measure Austin, the board member of the Austin Justice Coalition. I'm a privacy officer for the state of Texas. I'm also a mom of 3 kids. You're mostly taller than me at this point. And I'm the wife of a 100% military disabled veteran. As an activist and an advocate for data analytics, I must say that the numbers associated with success stories among the 54 countries in Africa speak for themselves. Now, just under half of the world's fastest growing economies for the last 2 decades are in Africa. The continent is home to a third of the planet's mineral reserves, as well as a large portion of our oil reserves. Today, nations around the world take notice to the skyrocketing potential associated with doing business in Africa. Even more so, Africans are taking the lead in defining what that means for them. The reality of civilizations taking from the continent and not giving back is one that many Pan-Africanists, such as myself, and other leaders around the world are working to help to redefine. As the world becomes more globally connected, I say the time is now to partner at the root with our brothers and sisters who understand the positive climate in that region. With great growth also comes great responsibility to ensure the well-being of those that are living on the continent also improves. The Tony Blair Africa Governance Initiative showed us that living conditions in sub-Saharan Africa is still low, even though the average income per person has risen 5% since 2007. In countries such as Angola, Congo, and Ethiopia, well-being has improved a bit here in the past 5 years. But a question that we might ask ourselves is, what is our duty as business cultivators to ensuring the foundation of the African people are strong as well? Today, I consider myself blessed to be able to have this conversation with so many great minds here in Austin, Texas. Before I get started with the panel, I want to go ahead and introduce the panel to you all here today. Starting right here with my beautiful sister, LaTanya Pincus. She's the CEO of Boaz Enterprises. You would give her a hand clap for her. And next is Murtada Mohammed. He's the president of the World Affairs Council of Austin. And then we have Dr. Eric Tangumon, if I said that correctly. Yes, awesome. He's the CEO and founder of IEM Press. And we also have Laura Defrashani. She's the founder and CEO of Crimson Woman. And last but not least, we have Mr. Emmanuel Odie, who is the founder and CEO of Odie Law Firm. And you give him a hand clap. I'll go ahead and take my seat as we get this conversation rolling. For the next hour or so, we are going to embark on some great dialogue here from this panel. And while I'll direct the questions to one panel member, please feel free to chime in as a collective group. The first question goes to Murtada Mohammed. There are many reports stating that Africa is currently on the move. And Ghana and Zimbabwe are constructing their own vehicle models. Ethiopia is one of the major airplane operators in Africa. They've even acquired a new generation of Airbuses just recently. All these confirm that Africa is on the move. So what does it take to get more American businesses to want to explore the business opportunities in Africa?
Manny, thank you so much for the introduction and addressing the question as well. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to be here. It's an honor to join your conference and be a member of such wonderful panelists around. That's a really, the question you're asking is very important and very vital. All the positive things that you mentioned me about the growth opportunities. And almost all the time that question is Africa a viable market? And if we step back and look at the resources available in Africa, one, human resources, we're looking at 1 billion consumers in Africa. In 2026, we expect about 1 billion. In addition to the natural resources, I traveled extensively in Africa, Nigeria, all the way to West Africa, Central Africa, myself originally from North Africa as well. So, having traveled there, dealt with the business communities and dealt with the people, and then previous jobs to promote the state of Texas export and investment in there. I will share with you firsthand as we look at the positive things that many addressed, and I just shared with you a minute ago, there are a lot of limitations in there, and even those limitations also create opportunities as well. One of the key limitations in there is the infrastructure, inadequate infrastructure. And it's a key factor for any successful business. I remember I was in Nairobi a few years ago, and I was doing a strategic program for the Kenyan maize producers or corn producers. And we see the fantastic facilities, very state-of-the-art facilities for storage of corn, very automated facilities, but yet miles away you find a lot of hunger and starvation, but then miles away you find a lot of affluency in there. It's obviously something we're missing. I don't know if many of you have been to Africa. It's just like a big garden, a tea plantation, coffee, and just really some parts of Africa reminds me of really the hill country in Austin here. But the question comes in, how to move your product from point A to point Z? That lack of infrastructure, the roads, the rail, transportation, that really take the products from point A to point B. So many, the lack of adequate infrastructure comes to me as the number one impediment as far as and motivation and incentive for businesses to move in Africa. Despite the fact, the lack of infrastructure creates also an opportunity for American companies to go there and go to it. But that's another issue. So the financing and the bidding process. And the other impediment is a lot of bureaucracy in there. And actually corruption, which is a common thing, not just Africa, but some parts of the world more than others, but it exists everywhere. So it cannot be corruption is the number one impediment. And there are reasons for corruption. It's the distribution of wealth, and we want to prevent that from happening. We should have a good economic development plan to do that. But the fact that it's there exists create a major impediment in terms of something that attracts American businesses to go to Africa. And then also the rising cost of fuels and electricity as well. And there's an initiative in Washington and actually adopted by the USAID, Agency of International Development, and that is Power Africa. Is very, very important. Now, we also must look at the fact that is for American businesses going to Africa, there's a lot of competition from Asia as well. That taking those opportunities for American companies at lower cost, and that becomes in play big time. If we American companies compete for projects in the continent, we compete with the world. And Asian companies tend to be really taking the lead on that because of their the cost of development as well. And they also might add something very important to me, and that is the workforce. There's so many. If you look at the number of the population age 15 to 25, it's stagnant. It's large, the number for the young individuals in there. But then the issue of workforce transformation, if we really wanted in Africa to attract foreign direct investment, American manufacturers coming there, we should have some good programs to empower the workforce with the skills needed to attract foreign direct investment. The issue of financing, I think, has been addressed as well. The issue of financing addressed at all levels. And I know the U.S. government has excellent programs for Africa. The OPIC, Overseas Private Investment Corporation, that offer really not just financing, but also insurance for American companies operating overseas against and I would say, I want to also add to it the armed conflict, but then the armed conflict is really a result of all of those things in there. I would not look at it as the number one hinder. The fact that it's there because, again, of all the things that we addressed, some of those things we addressed. On the positive side, I would say again, we have what it takes to really get into the African market in terms of products. And I'm sure my colleagues here on the panel would address some of those opportunities. So the opportunities are there. And also on the positive side, that we see that some African leaders and countries like Nigeria, Angola, Ethiopia, Mozambique, and the Tanzania, and many others are really taking some strong initiatives to demonstrate that they are very serious about attracting American businesses there and beyond. I would say attracting foreign investment, because at the end of the day, this is something that creates jobs. So I don't want to take more time because I know there's some other panelists that want to share their thoughts on that one, but I'm sure it would be another follow-up on what we're discussing now. So just want to share some of these thoughts with you, the positive and the negative things. But again, I see that with the speculation about Africa and the expectation we have, that hopefully we move forward with a lot of positive results, and I will keep the rest for us.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that. Does anyone
mío. Oh. But my name is Latanya McGee's, and it's great to be here. And one of the things I wanted to add to what Martina just eloquently stated was the fact that the image of the continent, which so many of us love. Unfortunately, in this age of 2015, all this technology, for some reason, there's the wrong image is still ingrained in the brains of a lot of people about what Africa actually is not. So I think it's also very important, actually, is that we start showing, like there's a website that says the Africa you've never seen on TV. There's a Twitter handle that's about that too. And it is awesome, some of the beautiful imagery that's there that some of us, those of you who are native to the continent, of course, this is just, regular for you. But in our Western society, there's so many challenges with just understanding and framing the beauty that comes from that continent. And also not only that, but it's interesting because history seems to get rewritten a lot too when it comes to us. It's quite all right to show an African who's done wonderful things with beautiful skin like ours. It's okay to show that. But the Western media has a problem with that. I've even watched documentaries on National Geographic where they have cast people who clearly were of African descent, looking clearly like Africans as white people. And I think that we have all witnessed that too, and that really needs to stop. And that's part of the reason, in my opinion, why some people don't even understand the value that comes from the beautiful continent of Africa and the beautiful people that it produces. So as far as image, those of you who are in the tourism industry, I strongly recommend that you start showing different imagery of Africa, of your different nations, the 54 beautiful nations there. Show the things that people really may not have seen in the West. The beaches, the downtown skylines, some of the most gorgeous architecture I've ever seen is in Africa. And we're talking beautiful, beautiful skylines and skyscrapers. So consider that too as those of you who may be in private industry or thinking about investing.
If I may, real quick, I would like to echo Alice and just thanking everybody for being here, for the folks who worked to organize this. I've been completely blown away by the execution. The folks that are here today, obviously, is a testament to your commitment to the very important issues we're discussing. As I've been sitting here listening to the very powerful and eloquent points that have been made, I agree with everything, and I'd like to echo the comments on the imagery. And I think from my perspective, from my standpoint as an attorney, I think one of the things that really factors in as an impediment is the image of Africa as a lawless kind of environment, particularly when you're talking about business investments and business development. People want certainty of the ability to have recourse. They want certainty of the ability to be able to have contractual rights enforced. And I think that I've been very happy with the evolution of the legal system and the protections and the recourse that we see in a lot of African countries. Because I think once the international investing community reaches a certain level of confidence in, capital goes in, I'll have ways of making sure managing it and keeping control of it and being able to exit and derive value, that then you'll see the capital infusion that will increase, and with that increased capital infusion, you'll see the remedying of issues like the infrastructure issue, the competition issue that prevents the availability of basic commodity goods, that makes the existing commodity goods just a little price sensitive. And so I think that that's a huge concern. That's a thing that we should all be thinking about in our respective spheres as to how we contribute to the continued evolution of a stronger regulatory and legal environment that will give people the confidence that if I invest 20, 30 million, whatever, that I'll have the ability to manage that and get the business return. So that's what
Good morning to everybody. I also just want to add that everything the other panelists have said, I am 100% in agreement with that. The images that we have of Africa, we need to change them. When I just got here, somebody asked me, oh, do you have our houses in Cameroon? If we have houses.
Oh.
If we have houses. Okay, now we have the different embassies in Cameroon that are currently housed somewhere. So if you want to do business in Africa, you have to have houses. 600 million households without electricity. That is a huge opportunity. The initiative, Power Africa, initiated by the Obama administration, is backed by the World Bank with about $5 billion of new infrastructure. And so those are opportunities where if you're thinking about doing business in Africa, you can tap into that. And we also have to start thinking, this is the 21st century, we need to also think out of the box. Most of the times, we want solutions that are transported. So we look at what we're doing here, we just want to transport it and implant it somewhere else. No, it's going to take us thinking a little bit out of the box. Maybe provided electricity in Africa, we don't need a national grid like we have here. Now, in the village, where my father's house right now, we have electricity because of solar panel. So there are other alternatives to be able to power the continent without necessarily having huge power plants and a big national grid that may cost a lot of money. So we have to think solutions that are going to be adapted to meet the need and the conditions of the ground in the continent.
Very good, yes. Sustainable solutions are key. Yes, yes.
Well, thank you for inviting me to be on the panel. It is an honor to be here with my esteemed colleagues and their honored guests. One of the issues that was brought up was about the image and the advisory council to doing business in Africa said that one of the things that is missing is lack of good information. And I think that's something that is really we need to work on, is getting the good information, because what is happening with exports and imports, if there aren't that risk analysis is there, or good information, then people are hesitant to really look into working with the continent. So that's something that we need to look at. But at the same time, we need to also, I just want to echo what President Obama said 2 years ago at the Cape Town University. He said that really businesses are a critical force for bringing prosperity and peace. And we need to look at businesses as a means for peace building. I have personally worked with a lot of entrepreneurs and businesses that to look at businesses as a force behind peace building, because that is a means for community building. And also we said that businesses are also key bridges between the continents. So we need to consider how important it is for us to gather good information and be able to work with each other.
And Laura, I'm glad that you mentioned that. Actually, the next question is for you, and it speaks to what you're saying right now. Private sectors are important components of African development. They raise economic growth through investment, employment, and business creation. They also contribute to knowledge transfer and many other benefits as well. To ensure that this growth will contribute to long-term sustainability, private companies should include the poor as producers and as the employees of these businesses as they go in, and as well as consumers. In the long run, these poor trained will become the key partners in business. From there, both Africa, with a huge number of consumers and natural resources, will have to make, will make profits. And so my question for you is, what are some of the business opportunities in the U.S. for the private sectors to get and to partner with?
It's a very good question. Private sectors are huge contributors to expanding our economy. They really serve as an engine of economic prosperity and growth. And they're a powerful force for poverty doing the partnerships. However, I really think that we need to look at incentives for private sectors to look at what can they do. Africa is a diverse region with so many different different levels of progress, and but 50 plus different countries in that continent, and each one of them has different needs and different different levels of progress. However, I think there is a report that in 2013 alone, the two-way export and import between U.S. and Africa was about $63 billion, and that's really huge. And that created 250,000 jobs in U.S. alone, and I'm sure as much, if not more. I don't have the statistics in Africa as well. So there are many opportunities for us to explore, and doing business in Africa, which started in November of 2012, is a huge resource for us to look at. And their mission is basically to find out what can we do to bring the businesses together and look at the relationship between the stakeholders in U.S. and in Africa. And there were a lot of different funds that have been given to or doing business in Africa has been using to expand their reach. There was $12 billion that was given to the Power Africa, which is huge. I'm a nuclear engineer, so I'm very much into what is going on in the power industry. So there is, and they want to increase the power by 8,000 megawatts, which is huge. And then there was about $14 billion that was given for clean energy, aviation, banking, and construction. So that's a great area that we can partner with each other in those 4 areas. And again, last year, doing business in Africa, President Obama mentioned that there will be another $7 billion that will be given as well, new financing to promote the relationship between the 2 continents. And one of the things that doing business in Africa is doing also is to reduce the barriers to trade. And I think that's something that also we need to really be looking at more and more. And there are different, of course, different countries, they have different barriers as well. I like the initiatives, 20 by 20 initiatives, which is a total of 20 trade and reverse trade vision by 2020 as well, that is promoting the U.S. engagement in Africa and vice versa. These missions are all wonderful, but what are the other resources that is available? Mr. Mohammed mentioned USAID. They are a great resource for private sectors. They have the know-how, they can help the relationship buildings, and they have done amazing work in a lot of different parts of the world. And in Africa, there is a partnership between Coca-Cola and USAID that is also providing that type of program. It's very, very it's a great initiative.
I'm glad that you mentioned that relationship. Awesome. So my next question, though, is actually for Mr. Emmanuel Obi. According to the African Development Bank, the private sector generates 70% of Africa's output, 70% of its investment, and 90% of its employment. How can the African private sector maximize impact and advance pressing issues such as inclusive growth and human capital, critical infrastructure, and sustainability?
Yeah, no, that's a fantastic question. I think, I want to start that answer by going back to something that you said during your introduction that I found very profound. And that is the notion that with great growth comes great responsibility. And I think that when we look at answering that question, that the first point to be addressed is this notion of what I like to call conscious capitalism or social responsibility, right? One of the things that's always frustrated me about the outlook on Africa is that it's always sometimes been a cash and dash kind of outlook. Let's go in here, let's figure out what we can extract, how we can get the value, and let's dash, right? And I think if you look at the groups that have been successful in Africa, particularly like the Asian groups, the Chinese, their strategy is one that employs a long-term partnership. Their strategy is one that employs a sense of responsibility, a sense of giving back to the communities in which they will be deriving revenue from. So with that backdrop, let me try to address some of the points that your question notes. The first thing is with respect to growth, right? There is a tendency to isolate and attempt to dominate, right? In the African business space, and what you see in other countries is this working to facilitate the conglomerate, right? To create, to come together to create something that is greater than the individual parts, right? As it relates to the human capital, that is an absolutely critical area because I think the private sector can do a lot as it relates to training, as it relates to education, and as it relates to fostering an entrepreneurial spirit, which is something that I think has been greatly lost with all the focus on the aid work. And I'm not to say that aid to Africa is a bad thing. It's certainly a good thing, and there are regions in the country that need that aid. But as anybody with any kind of economic bearing will tell you, that aid, goes back to the old adage of you can give a man a fish or you can teach him how to fish, right? And then you look at the converse of that, which is that the aid industry, in and of itself, is a billion-dollar industry, right? And there are people that profit from that. I had a very riveting conversation just before this panel about the ill effects of that and how that compounds throughout the economic sphere. As it relates to infrastructure, I think that the private sector should again take responsibility and know and make sure that a certain portion or percentage of their corporate earnings are being reinvested into infrastructure. And I think that's not even really a responsibility thing, that's just a good business decision to make. That puts you in a better position, as you noted, to get your stuff in and out. It gets you in a better position to maximize your growth. And then I think with the final point, and that is the creating organizations and creating institutions that foster, greater regional connection, right? Creating more organizations that get together and systematically look at these issues and systematically work and compare notes and say, well, what's working in Ghana? What's working in Nigeria? What's working in South Africa? How can we extrapolate from those areas that are working a game plan that we can then systematically roll out to other areas for more long-lasting benefit? So I think the private sector is absolutely critical, and I think that if those companies take responsibility and take some basic steps, I think that the impact and the potential will continue to be maximized.
Yeah, so Zoe, thank you very much for mentioning about some of the areas of aid. When African countries had independence in 1960, the idea was to pump in money, and we did that and we failed woefully. Right now, she talked about partnership. In order to get in partnership with somebody, you have to believe that it has something to offer. So the way forward for us is to understand that the private sector is going to be the most important part to invest in, and we have to, if we're going to do business with the private sector in Africa, we know they also have something to contribute. We need to work together in partnership. So I'm going to talk about a pilot project that my nonprofit is carrying out as we speak. There is an orphanage in Cameroon, and I spoke with the founder and the director about their needs, and they have an elementary school. Last year we sent money to pay their teachers, and this year I realized that we can't put them on life support forever. So I asked them, what is a need in your community that you can meet through the orphanage and generate income and help the community? They looked around and said, there is lack of protein intake in the community, we can keep pigs, we can raise chickens. So I told them, we're going to raise the capital for the chickens and the pigs, but we have to ensure that that project is run and profitably. You're going to make profit. The fact that you're an orphanage does not mean that you should make money. The only difference is that you make the money, we reinvest the money in the orphanage. I want you guys to get out of life support. So right now, we are raising enough money to institute, to help them build the poultry and the piggery. When we do that, we are also going to provide a library for the school. We're going to raise the standard of that school so they can bring in enough money to run the institution. So that those are some of the solutions that we have to work in partnership with the local businesses in Africa to find long-lasting solutions that are sustainable. The time to just pour in money is past. It hasn't worked. And so if you have ideas of trying to invest in Africa, there are lots of opportunities to partner with the people, A, to understand their conditions. So it's going to be very important to factor in the conditions on the ground if you want to run a business that is going to be successful and have long-lasting impact on the community.
I appreciate how you mentioned walking together in partnership to give off life support. That's very profound. The next question is for Ms. Higgins. How can we work together to mobilize investments in sustainable initiatives and reduce costs of projects out there?
Thank you for asking. Actually, before I do answer that, maybe I just wanted to just share some information just generally. Sometimes we talk in generalities, when we hear the numbers, it can just really make you stand up straight. And I just want to briefly, and I will answer your question, talk about the United States and its lack of investment in Africa. If you look at what the Chinese are doing, it's really mind-blowing, it's mind-boggling. So even though you hear about, all these conversations about, well, the infrastructure is not what it should be, the roads aren't as great as they should be, well, guess what? China is eating our lunch. And let me just read these statistics to you really quickly. The United States, the USA Africa trade dwindled from 125 billion in the year 2011 to 99 billion in 2012, and in 2013 all the way down to $85 billion. But what are our Chinese counterparts doing? Of course, they're not going to talk about this. They don't want to promote it because they're in business. They want you to think that Africa is not a place to invest. They want you to think that it's somewhere that you should be because guess what? If you're the only one that's really being a major player in the market, that means that you're probably winning all the deals. So for example, let's see here. Let me just find my notes real quickly. So the China-Africa trade reached $166 billion in 2011. But in 2014, it's over $210 billion. And I just said in the year 2013 in the U.S.-Africa trade was $83 billion. So ladies and gentlemen, there is money to be made. There are opportunities. And the Chinese are eating our lunch. I said it earlier and I say it again. So even though there are all these challenges in infrastructure, etc., they have found a way to make it work. And sometimes they're just not the nicest people to work with either, and they feel like they own everything that they're doing. They don't want to be partnering. So one of the things I would also suggest is that when you all are doing these deals, you have the power, especially if you're on the team for the country that needs the goods and the services. Tell them that you want to have like an internship apprenticeship program. Everybody's got their education and things like that, but we can all learn from each other. For example, there may be an opportunity for 50% of the work to go to local sustainable businesses. So those who are African owners in that nation. And not only that, but you may start at 50% and then grow to 70 or 80. And a lot of times what the Chinese do is not only will they come to your nation and build a project, but they'll also bring their workforce with them. So that's a challenge when you are trying to develop your workforce, learn skills, etc. So not only are they getting the deals, but they're not even showing you how to do it. So when they're gone, you're still interdependent. You're still dependent on them. So that's a challenge too. You know, so we got to think, as the gentleman said earlier, out of the box. Like, what can we do to make it sustainable? We don't want Africa to become gentrified like East Austin has become. You know, it's ridiculous. There's so many resources. Did anybody hear that the second largest diamond in the last 100 years was found in Botswana? 1,111 carats found 2 days ago in Botswana, in southern Africa. So we know the minerals are there. We know the biggest in the world are behind one. It's the second largest. So not only is that gorgeous diamond there, but there's so many other opportunities. So also, ladies and gentlemen, don't forget, you know, it's like you've got the great mind and the ability to do wonderful things as well. We don't have to depend on the Europeans in order to be able to get all the great ideas. Sometimes we just need opportunity. Can I get an amen? And so the thing of, oh, did I say that? That's what I was thinking in my head. It just came out. Well, I'll say it again. Can I get a good amen? Amen. So we have the ability and the strength, and we have the resources. But sometimes it's just the opportunity. And I personally am tired of seeing other groups and organizations and nations come into our area thinking that they know everything. And they want to not only, colonialism, how in the world did that get going? Let's just start there. Okay? So they've got a history of doing the wrong thing and not necessarily being right about it. So back to your question. How can we work together to, what was the other? Reduce costs?
Well, how can we work together to mobilize investment in sustainable initiatives to reduce costs of projects?
Yes. So I think a great way of reducing costs on projects is to talk to the people who are working in that environment. So if you're shipping things in from all across the world on cargo ships and flying things in, well, guess what? That's expensive. You know, and yes, there are challenges with transportation and infrastructure, but yet still, I think the gentleman said earlier, think outside the box. What do you have? What do we have here locally? What do we have in our nation, being in Africa, of course, that's what the example that we're using, where we can find ways of bringing things into our areas that are not as expensive. So sometimes the transportation costs are just really high, and so that would make projects more difficult, especially when you're talking about building projects or actually products versus just services. As far as working together, I think it's a great idea just to put out a call for people who want to be involved in a project. You know, it may not be a traditional Wharton School of Business graduate, but my goodness, there's so many great ideas and wonderful things that are happening. Even there's so many young people, there's so many stories of Africans in Africa who started businesses because they saw a need. There was a need for protein, like this gentleman said. I'm interested in finding out how much it is to purchase a pig because we may make a contribution for you. But yet still, the small things really add up to large ones. So, you know, if you're in a place where you find that people have like needs and like interests, it's okay. You know, go and talk to them. You know, sometimes I find that, not always, but sometimes people who really don't feel comfortable in different environments, like if they, say, for example, go to the United Nations or go to a meeting at the White House, or if there's some place like at an International Monetary Fund meeting, they're not necessarily going to reach out to others for whatever reason. But that's the time to do it because the decision makers are there. That's the time to build relationships, to build partnerships, to talk about ways that you can work together, especially if you see that someone's doing something successfully. You know, we've all heard issues and stories about needs in certain nations, but sometimes we're kind of hesitant to give because we don't know where the money's really going to go, right? So even though I'm just meeting this gentleman, I feel pretty confident that what he says is true. So if I make a donation for it to help him with the protein, then I'm pretty sure it's going to make it there. You know, so in those kind of environments and these types of environments, you get an idea of who's who, and of course I trust Bapu and Sam and their judgment as well, getting the right families together. You know, but it's that kind of thing. It's just the out-of-the-box way of thinking about how can we work together, what can we do to make a sustainable, local, African-centric, and African-owned and operated for the next 100 years, next 1,000 years. What can we do to create that sustainability and a model that will work and be a win-win for our people?
Very good. Thank you. Thank you for that. The next question is for Dr. Eric Tagnon. In the next 3 to 5 years, Africa is expected to lose up to 60% of its talented engineers and technicians due to retirement, precisely at the time when it needs those skills to put in place the infrastructure and manufacturing needed towards transformation as we're talking about today. This paradox of the young means that we have to simultaneously address the job needs of the youth. We spoke about that earlier, about empowering the youth. Can you tell me, how can companies help unlock the potential of the youth?
You mean the companies here or the companies in Africa?
Yes, actually both.
Okay, that is a very interesting question, and I'm glad that question has been posed to me because I'm part of that brain drain. Seated here, well-trained geoscientists. I'm supposed to be out there also trying to look for the natural resources that the continent needs. I'm here now contributing. She talked about the diamonds. Do you know that the biggest diamond ever was also found in Africa? It's called the Star of Africa. It was found in 1905. And that diamond is actually, well, they kept it with about 9 different diamonds, and are all in the British ground. The second one was just found again at just about 2 days ago. So Africa is not done yet. After more than 100 years, they still found another diamond. Still many more diamonds to be found. I've been thinking about this issue of brain drain, the issue of the talent that the continent needs to move forward, leaving the continent in growth. And at times it keeps me awake in the night. I think part of it is going to come through education. We have to make people understand that to him that more is given, more is also expected. Most of the times, we only hear about one-sided story about living in the West. Before I came here, I had no clue about the cost, what I was going to give up to live in this society. I haven't read much about it, and that is a challenge for all of us to write, tell our stories, the sleepless nights we've had, the tears of the pillow, of missing family, missing familiar smells, missing familiar foods, missing the family reunions, the weddings, the deaths, and all the different celebrations that makes life whole. So most of the times, we put our money ahead of the essence of being as human beings. So we need to go back to the basics and challenge people that before you leave the continent, this is going to be the cost on you. Not only what you're going to lose, but what is going to be expected of you to give back, because more has been given to you. I think that is why forums like this are very important. I look forward to us organizing more, and even in the continent itself to have conferences where we can actually talk about the cost of leaving the continent to go somewhere as a so-called greener pastures. Because the pasture is not as green as it is painted. There is a lot of struggle when you leave the continent and you come out here trying to find your way. I lived here for 11 years without seeing my dad. He couldn't attend my graduation when my PhD was being awarded. Those are moments that I wanted my father to be involved in them. I had to give up all that. And during that time, God forbid bad things, if one of them died, I could have even gone to the funeral. So what is that all about? We need to recapture. You see, when you mention colonization, when we had our first encounter with the West, they sold trinkets to us. We bought a land. We're still buying a land. Life is all about money. There is more to that. And I'm telling you from experience. I wish I was out there. And so I'm here because I'm beginning to find my place, that it is us to connect the North and the South. Us. No other person can do that for us. Because we understand both worlds very well. It's a huge responsibility. And we need to challenge other people to understand that. And maybe leaving the continent for greener pastures is not going to be as attractive as it seems right now.
Would anybody else like to go ahead?
Well, thank you for sharing that. And, it's very heartfelt. I understand. I left when I was very young, and it takes a while. As you get older, you actually understand that much more. When I was younger, I didn't really think about it so much. But we sacrifice think we really need to look at the women and how, and also young girls, and education of the girls has been, there are a lot of studies that shows that if in primary school, 1 year of education, it will increase their salary at an older age between 10 to 20%. And in this is in primary school, and the secondary school, it actually increases their salary later on in life by 20 to 25%. So it's a huge, need for just really allowing them to have better education. And I think we really need to, the private sectors need to look at that as a capacity building. We need to help our women to be more educated, to be empowered, to feel more confident about their contribution, especially to peace and prosperity. Women by nature are just, more compassionate, and I think all the war in the world would not really be the way that they are if we have allowed our women to be, to have more education and have understanding. So that would be something that, I just hope that we can consider more and more. I've been involved with United Nations Association, and their Millennium Development Goals have really been successful in some of the African countries, especially. They emphasize, of course, poverty reduction, but also women's programs and women's empowerment. And my recommendation would be to look at the new Sustainable Development Goal, the SDGs, which started September of this year and will go to the 2030. There are 17 goals, and some of them are about poverty reduction and women's equality of gender. There are some programs that was done in U.S. and Morocco that was all about changing policies in Morocco and looking at different types of programs that they have in order to help women as an engine for prosperity and community development. Thank you.
Okay, I was just gonna, and also I think it's important too to show the value of nation building. I think sometimes it's like, oh, the U.S., yes. Let's talk about home. Let's talk about the valuable things that are at home. Let's talk about the value that not only do we bring to ourselves, but we bring to the nation and to the world. So I think that's something too, is let's look introspectively, let's look inside and see what the value that we have. And so with that, young people may be more inclined to actually stay home, because if we're always talking about somewhere far away, well, guess what? They don't want to go somewhere far away. But if we talk about the value and the beauty of what we have and what we can do to make our nation better, then maybe that will also encourage young people to stay. And you may want to consider internship programs and local things. Get them involved as youth. Let them know what's happening. How mom and dad go to work. Here in the U.S., we have Take Your Child to Work Day. So sometimes just getting a glimpse of that, you can be like, well, maybe that's something I can do too. So I think we should encourage people to look inside and say, this is the value we bring to our country, the value we bring to our continent, and maybe this is something that I can do professionally here in this nation.
And yes, real quick, I think definitely agree with everything that's said. And I think the other way to look at this is to focus on the potential economic benefit or the potential economic benefit that could be lost if this issue is not carefully dealt with. And I think that breaks down into two subcomponents. That's one, in terms of what is this massive consumer base that we're talking about going to look like, right? And so if the youth aren't properly trained and provided with opportunities, either entrepreneur or work-wise, these consumers will be without the consumer power that is a critical component to that cycle of economic growth, right? The same thing as it relates to the workforce, right? If you look at countries like India, right, that have taken a large, consumer base, a large population base, and have been able to systematically monetize that with the ability, development of outsourcing. I think India is probably one of the greatest hubs right
question is actually for you, Mr. Mohammed. A recent report came out that shows that private capital inflows to Africa, both direct and portfolio investments, have increased from 13.2 billion in 2003 to 48.3 billion in 2012. Given that demand for capital, what could African policymakers and exchanges do to encourage more listings and offer investors more opportunities?
Sure, great question, and just listening to what my colleagues on the panels here mentioned, I think a lot of good things, very important that demand reforms, and I think the reforms have been already taking place at some time, and it's really important to increase the inflow of capital in there, those reforms, private reforms, free market economy, privatization reforms, all the things to really contribute to the stabilization of Africa. They're very important to continue integrating Africa in the world economy, and it's also important that as we're discussing all these opportunities, we are not really setting priorities for Africa. Absolutely not. Africans are setting their own priorities. We have a lot of good programs on the books, and to answer the question as well, programs such as the AGOA program, it's basically eliminate trade barriers and support African goods be exported to the United States. Very important for Africa's economy. Programs such as the OPIC programs, AID programs. I think we have enough programs now on the books. What we need is to further activate them, make the private industry in the United States more aware of them. And that is through forums such as this one and beyond, trade missions from the United States to Africa, create that dialogue, continue to do more of inbound missions from Africa in here. And I know it was mentioned before, as far as really the image issues, it's really create the awareness of the business opportunities. Really important. I think this area is a bit behind, but we do have some good programs. And you cannot compare the American business with Chinese businesses. They get a lot of support for their own government. Their system is very different from the US system. If I'm a CEO of a company and looking at business opportunities abroad to take advantage of, I'll definitely look at the most profitable one for the company. That's the job. But we do have some good programs to support the private sector foreign market entries, but not the same as China. And I don't think we want it to be that way. We love our system, and unfortunately, that's going to be a case all the time as far as China beating us in some places. It's just the way their system is structured and the way our system is structured. But to further expand the involvement of American businesses abroad, especially in Africa, foreign direct investment, I think creating more awareness of the programs available, more awareness of the market opportunities, support the engagement of really broader dialogue, continue the reforms in Africa, in the privatization, the democratization. I think all these aspects will help further stabilize an important continent like Africa, and engaging more American businesses in the economic opportunities.
Yeah, if I may add real quick, I think you made this point earlier. I think, from my perspective, I often, work with clients and help them in structuring business ventures and a variety of different deals in Africa. And one of the things that is always very hard, and one of the areas where I add the most value is in the continue to work. There's been a lot of advances, not that we're still at the dark ages, but there can be more time and effort and resources put into developing larger and more reliable repositories of valuable information and information that people can look at and say, this has been, given the stamp of approval by some, whatever, and we can rely on these numbers, we can rely on this information in making our decision. I think that's one of the major constraints right now, with investors. If they're not able to get the information with them at ease, then they're not going to do the deal. And I think that's one area that we can continue to do something good.
And with the technological advances, there's no excuse why not, right?
Exactly.
Well, so what I'd like to kind of do is formalize the panel at this moment. But first, I'd like you to consider this. We all have a part to play, right? We all have a part to play in the growth and the sustainability of Africa. We have to begin to create more of a Pan-Africanistic mindset, a more collective mindset, starting here, right, and then reaching back, right, as much as possible. We have to empower the youth. We mentioned, I think, Mr. Mohammed, you mentioned that the vast number of youth actually in Africa. It supersedes even here in America, not in all continents. So how do we reach those youth? How do we empower them? How do we create a thought of giving back and staying, when they do receive this education and so forth, coming back and pouring into their area. We also have to consider the redefinition, the image. That was a huge point that you made, and I'm glad that you did. So what I'd like to do right now is, again, we're going to open this up to some questions from the audience. If you do have a question, be mindful of time, though we do have some other commitments. I'd like to allow a question there in the audience. Anyone? Yes, ma'am.
I was born in Zambia and raised, educated in South Africa, left Southern Africa in my 30s with my husband and my children for very specific reasons. And you had touched on the brain drain. So I'm also part of that. So I was in the IT sector as was my husband. Our children, and I think this is just a sort of a positive note on the brain drain. My children have a deep desire to go back to Africa once they finish their education. So I've got one son who's a college graduate about to pursue his PhD. He's in the chemistry as his thing, so pharmaceutical research, etc. And then I have a daughter who's in aeronautical science. So for both of them, they feel that pull to go back to Africa and find a way of getting back to where they were born. So I think that's an important aspect as part of the empowerment that you're talking about, is trying to make sure that we create opportunities for them to go back. Will my husband and I go back? I don't know. We feel like we're citizens of the world at this stage. We're waiting for the next opportunity. Who knows where that is? But I think it's very important to recognize that children, our youth, are going to seek opportunities to be educated outside of Africa because that's where they've been and that's where they can be better educated. That's why we moved down here. But with the same token, just as we start attracting our youth to come out here to be educated, we need to find ways, and I'm interested to find out if anybody can really start thinking and has any ideas of how we can build that attraction to move back again and open up the doors for them to come back. Now, of course, my children, have the same skin color that I do, and they sometimes feel that maybe they won't be accepted back in Africa because they've now left and they've been raised here. It wasn't their decision, it was our decision. But we're citizens of Africa.
Yeah, thank you for that question. How do we attract? I'm glad that children are thinking of going back. It's exciting. Africa is on the rise. So that's like even my son. He was born in Cameroon, moved here when he was less than 2 years old. So I'm beginning to immerse him in issues concerning the continent. And hopefully, I'm going to take him go visit a couple of times. And we don't have to separate the connection. The bridge has to be, we have to keep the communication lines open. I'm very open if you want. So I think for parents that are here, they need to expose their children to the continent. The fact that you left, it doesn't rule out their kids going back and making a very significant contribution. So we need to keep those contribution lines open. And personally, I've done personal initiative. I've started a publishing company, and the whole idea is our stories have to be told. We have to tell our stories, write our history, she said our way. So I Am Press is about us publishing our own works. I have IAM approach, inspire, equip, motivate. So I was in Cameroon on the national TV last year, and we've started, we're going to take the continent by storm. We're going to motivate our people. We're going to inspire them to believe that there is nothing wrong in having a dark complexion, has nothing to do with anything. So it's us that are going to stand in the gap and begin to empower our people to realize that they are sitting on gold. Because when it comes to human capacity, resources, no continent, I'm a geologist. I know what we have, the natural resources that we have. So the future is only going to get better. That is the message that we're beginning to communicate across the board. And hopefully it's going to be traction.
Yes, sir. Actually, I'm going to take one more question, and then what we're going to do, again, just being mindful of the time, I'm going to actually have the panel go down into the audience, and we're going to continue the dialogue between one-on-one, if that's okay. But if I can take one last question, and then before we do this movement, and actually my brother right here had his hand up first, if you don't mind, and then we'll come down, I'll have the panel come down, and then we'll have that dialogue, that individual dialogue. Sir?
My question to the panel is, what programs and organizations are over there in Africa or that are migrating from America to Africa in engineering the youth in Africa of today for the days of tomorrow that you guys are speaking of? Africa is a very powerful nation, and it's never going to deplenish, it's never going to go nowhere to the end of time. So what programs are being offered to those youth of Africa, white, black, purple, or pink? Color doesn't matter. Africa always been many different colors. But what are we actually doing to engineer those youth of today for the days of tomorrow?
Can that question be directed to Mr. Mohammed? Would you like to take that one?
For the youth?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I'm more economic development.
Right.
And empowering people, of course, getting jobs.
Yes, sir.
And get jobs, it's really workforce transformation. And that means the right education to train people to do the job. So I'm very much for that as my specialty, that's my work. And, but I understand that some members on the panel deal directly with youth programs in terms of exchange programs and things of that nature. But if I would address that question, definitely economic development, job opportunities, empowerment in terms of education, skills, and I think that would be the most fruitful program that we provide in the nation in general and its youngsters as well.
I just want to thank the panel for being up here today, for taking the time to share your wealth of knowledge. And again, I want to go ahead and turn this into more of a mixer question and answer, and really capitalize upon the name of this event, which is Business Matchmaking, right? So don't leave here without a number. Don't leave here without a business card. Don't leave here without sharing some type of social media, something that will ensure the connection that you make today is going to be, again, sustainable and lasting and actually produce some measurable result later, right? So if you guys wouldn't mind giving this panel a big hand clap. Awesome. I'm going to ask the panel to come over, take a quick photo, and then we are going to continue this business matchmaking right there. And I'd also love to see all of